Hello, everyone. Good evening. It's a pleasure to see all of you. I'm so happy to see all of you here tonight because what we're talking about today it's at the forefront of everything that everyone here in this church has been working on their entire lives, and frankly, that stands up to the principles of what happens here every single day from this podium here since 1854. I am proud that all of us have been standing together for transgender and equality for so many years. And I want to thank Ani for helping us set this up in this great evening and the conversation that everybody's going to have here tonight, and all of our partners, the JP Forum, the Freedom for All campaign, the Transgender Political Coalition, and the Keshet, and also to my colleague, Representative Liz Malia, who I have been serving with for so many years, and I've known her since, and she has been a fighter on so many fronts, and also somebody who brings consensus and brings some real thoughtful solutions to so many things. So, folks, today's an affirmation of our support for the trans community, for everybody to know that we stand with you and we love you. Affirmation is only the first step, though. We have to band together to ensure that fundamental rights stay in place, and the law that we worked so hard together in the House, in the Senate, with my friend Matt O'Malley, City Councilor Matt O'Malley, who is another instrumental elected official in this city. It's so important that we stick together on this, because one thing that we know is that this law is about treating people the way we ourselves would want to be treated. Transgender people should have the same basic protections as everyone else to their lives, their safety, their privacy, and their dignity. In 2016, my colleagues and I in the State House, we passed the transgender non-discrimination bill in a bipartisan supermajority vote of both chambers. There was no question. Thank you for the applause. Thank you. Thank you. It was a piece of something that in the legislature we take a lot of pride in, because we had gone through it when we were taking up the issue of same-sex marriage back in 2006, and other initiatives as well. But no law happens without the tireless advocacy and work from all of you, the constituents, our citizens. The process leading up to the law showcased the virtues of the Commonwealth values most: equal and fair treatment for all. I don't know what happened. I really don't know what happened. The couples that filed this blatantly discriminatory language succeeded in getting it on the ballot. So a yes vote would keep the current law as it is. Remember, a yes vote keeps the law as it is. So we have to tell everybody, yes, vote yes. And I can't stress that enough. We were successful in taking a number of things off, in engaging and getting a few things off the ballot: minimum wage, paid family leave, and then the repeal and the sales tax. Those three big things. We succeeded. There's now a $15 minimum wage, and there's full paid family leave guaranteed as right. If the governor signs it, we'll have those three petitions off. But there will still be two on the ballot, unless something happens to one, which is the nurse staffing ratio and this one. So one thing that we know here in this community is that we got this here, right? We got this here in Jamaica Plain. We know that we're going to be good here in Jamaica Plain, because all of us are going to make sure that we get our votes out. I'm making it a part of everything that I do in my own campaign, and I hope that every single person that is on the ballot will do the same thing and work with the same fervor. And I'm sure that that will be the case. I have no doubt. So we know that support for the law is strong. The state's leading law enforcement agencies, the Law Enforcement Association agencies, more than 250 businesses have all endorsed the yes vote. Speaker DeLeo kicked off this initiative with all of you in downtown a few weeks ago. But we know that despite this widespread support, that there's still so much that we have to make sure that we do. A lot of people don't know that there is this issue on the ballot. So we have to remain vigilant as opposition efforts look to spread myths about what this law does. We have to take on the radio. The garbage and the hate that Howie Carr spews through that radio station is ridiculous, and others. So we have to counteract that in other communities. So, like I said, I've been spending time and talking to members and other folks in other communities, because in this new job that I have in the State House, I spent some time traveling across the state, and it's given me an opportunity to talk about the things that are important to us as well. And it's a conversation, and it's something that I've never had the opportunity to do. And I'm making sure that I take full advantage of that. So tonight, you're going to hear from a number of inspiring leaders on this front, and I hope you not only carry their stories with you, but also encourage others to stand with us at the ballot box in November. Vote yes to continue to treating people fairly here in the Commonwealth with equality, with dignity. This law is about protecting freedom for all of Massachusetts residents, including our transgender brothers and sisters, so that everyone can live free of discrimination. Nobody should ever have to live in fear of discrimination simply because of who they are. And that's what tonight is about, making sure that we get some energy so that we can wake people up, so that they can go out and again touch those places that need to be touched. We did it way back when, in 2005, 2006, and we're going to do it again. And I'm honored and I'm so pleased to be here with you, and I know that we're going to succeed. I know that we're going to succeed because we're starting out from the right point. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you so much. I'd like to bring up Representative Liz Malia to come say a couple of words as well. Here you go.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for being here tonight. I've been around the legislature for a fairly long time, but I've also been active in this community, in the GLBTQ community in Jamaica Plain. I don't know how many people were here that would remember an organization that got organized sometime in the mid-'80s. They're called the Lesbian and Gay Neighbors of Jamaica Plain. And at that time, we were few and far between. We were here, but we didn't have a lot of support. And the pastor here at this church was the first chance we had to begin connecting with each other. So we did something that was really radical. We had a potluck dinner in the afternoon once a month on Sundays. So it was like really radical. But what it was an acknowledgement of the fact that lots of us had had backgrounds in politics and had done other important work. Some of us were involved in our own Democratic Ward Committee work in JP. Some of us were new. But we knew that there were other political groups. And this is Boston, after all, and there's always been an incredible breeding ground for politics and people getting involved. But what we hadn't had was a chance to just spend time, be together. There was no agenda, it wasn't a political, you know, there were no labels particularly in terms of you were conservative or, you know, activist or whatever. People came together and spent a couple hours once a month and basically got to know each other. And it was not heavy lifting, and it certainly wasn't high tech. At that point, there was almost no tech. But the fact that there was an open welcome, and that this church in particular was the home for that type of, you know, really early days, nascent community building, gave a lot of us the supports we needed to continue to do some of the political work. Like convincing the Democratic Party that we in fact were human beings and Democrats too, and that we deserve to have a place within the party. And, you know, I talk to people sometimes and they think back and say, you know, this wasn't a welcoming environment, and I said, no. I mean, honestly, one of the first years we went, a group of us who used to call ourselves Bay State Dems, Bay State Gay and Lesbian Dems, now are known as Bay State Stonewall Dems, got together and went to the state convention and started to push to get our names, our identity, our reality included in the state party official legislation, and it was tough. I remember a number of folks who were straight, who worked in Jamaica Plain with my Democratic Ward Committee, who offered to volunteer to wear these really ugly gay vote hats. They were pretty sad. And walk around the convention and talk to people, because we were trying to get language in the state party constitution, in the preamble. And a number of them came back to us later and said they couldn't believe what happened. We said, what do you mean? He said, people walked up to them and knocked their hats off. And I say that only to sort of underscore the fact that the places that all of us in our communities presumed we were welcome in, we weren't. And it took the courage and the strength of our allies, members of the LGBTQ community who would come out and fight, be themselves, and it took a while, but it was really worth it. In the long run, first state in the country to legalize marriage. And, you know, again, in some ways that seems like a long time ago to me, but I was there and very much in part of that. And to be honest with you, I wasn't sure how long it would take us to get specific transgender legislation through, but the community had really developed. We were hearing from people who were talking about how important it was to have transgender community included in the definition of the human race and the political race, the political community. And we ran into some, as you heard Jeff say, some pretty ugly stuff during some of the early debates. And we overcame it. And unfortunately, we live in an era that I think some of our worst demons have snuck out, and they're jumping on all kinds of issues of division and separation and pointing at other people and creating fear and misunderstanding. And those folks apparently don't have enough to do that's in a positive vein, that they went to the ballot and they put it out on the ballot. And again, they would like it if it was a very quiet process, that only their advocates knew about it and voted for it. And the reality is we have to get louder and stronger, and we have to wake up our friends, our communities, our family members, and get them to get out and make sure they vote yes on transgender rights this fall. And again, one of the things, the lessons that I've tried to learn is, you know, when Trump won and things seemed to be going sideways politically, and then we were watching every night some of the more horrific things that we can witness on TV, like children and their families and their parents being separated and it being pushed under the rug and ignored. And, you know, I don't know of any other country in this day and age that basically puts kids in concentration camps. And how we got there, I don't know. But I know that if we start fighting back one issue at a time and work with each other, we can overcome it in the long run. And we have to try, because it's gotten uglier. And again, you watch these people who are masters at working on people's fears and misunderstanding and really generating hate in people who essentially have who don't understand and who are very afraid for whatever their own reasons are of life and you know, positive activity. So I'm hoping, I'm counting on the fact that we're going to be able to do this. I'm counting on the fact that Freedom for All Mass has really done an incredible job beginning to organize and is starting to reach people throughout the state. But it especially means a lot to me that Transgender Mass is here tonight in this particular faith community, where I remember as being someone who identified as feeling different was welcome. And it wasn't about the religion or the other beliefs that I had. I was just welcome. And a lot of people in my community at that time, for a lot of people, it was the first time they really had a chance to come out, meet other folks, and just relax. I mean, we would go to the movies together and have, game nights and do all kinds of corny things. But it was a safe community and it was welcoming. So I just want to thank Freedom for All Massachusetts for organizing this and for the incredible amount of work you're doing, because this is hard work. There's nothing glamorous about door knocking, phone calling, reaching out to people, doing the other work. It's definitely hard work. So I want to thank you for that. And I also want to thank the members of this congregation for letting us in and opening their hearts up to us. So thank you.
So we have a very exciting program. We're going to get to it. We have one more person, one of our other really special co-sponsors. They're going to say a couple of words. Please welcome Councilor O'Malley.
Thank you and good evening. Thank you so much, obviously, the JP Forum, to Keshet, to Freedom for All Massachusetts, to the Mass Transpolitical Caucus, to First Church for hosting us as always. My name is Matt O'Malley, and I am proud to be the District 6 City Councilor. Some of you may know, with some of you I have worked. Before that, I was the political director at Mass Equality in 2008 and 2009. And as we're talking about a campaign, that's sort of how I want to offer my remarks, my brief remarks tonight. While I was the political director at Mass Equality, we had passed and secured, because of people like Jeff Sánchez and Liz Malia and others, protection for marriage equality throughout the Commonwealth. In 2008, transitioning into that, our focus really was passing the Transgender Non-Discrimination Act. We had a very robust, strong bill, similar to what was eventually signed. We had as many co-sponsors as would be needed to pass, but it was stalled for many, many years. Ultimately, in 2011, after I had left Mass Equality, a bill did pass, and it was a good bill, but it could have been better, and it did not include public accommodations. That would come another 5 years later, where it was passed, again, because of the leadership of Jeff Sánchez and Liz Malia and Sonia Chang-Diaz and others. It passed overwhelmingly. From that point, we are now looking at a referendum this November. Now, one of the many slogans at Mass Equality during the mid-aughts was something that's simple but incredibly profound. It's wrong to vote on rights. Unfortunately, that is precisely what will happen in November. People's rights will be voted on. And that's scary, and that's dangerous, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I think many of us have followed this. The polls are closer on this than I think any other referenda that will be before us, and we have a lot of work to do. The good news is, and this is just one anecdote, when I ran for this district city council seat in 2010, there was a very nasty mail piece directed towards me because of my support of the Transgender Non-Discrimination Act at Mass Equality, and it was mailed to senior citizens in West Roxbury. My district is primarily West Roxbury and Jamaica Plain. If you were above the age of 65 and you lived in West Roxbury, you would get this really hateful letter that used some really offensive language that we all know. I know that because my parents received the letter. The good news is that it arrived in people's mailbox the day before the election. The good news is that during Election Day, I was standing at a poll, and a number of senior citizens stopped me to tell me how offended they were. They would say, sometimes quietly, that they had a family member who was transgender, or they had a friend, and they thought that was wrong. And we ended up winning, if I can be so bold. We ended up winning pretty substantially, and it made that victory all the sweeter because people were turned off by the divisive rhetoric that was used. Now, that was just one small election 8 years ago. This is going to be a much larger election. And as Rep. Sánchez said, I'm not a betting man. I stopped making predictions about politics after 2 years ago. But I think it's safe to say that Jamaica Plain should vote overwhelmingly yes. So it is up to all of us to treat this like a presidential election where they have swing states. We need to call our friends, we need to call our family members, we need to call folks in other parts of the city. We can't forget, we have to make sure on Election Day that all of our neighbors, all of our friends in Boston vote, but we really need to focus on folks who may not be as familiar with this issue, may not know why it is so important to vote yes, what vote yes means. I mean, the mere fact that I think people, and I will be candid, as we were getting ready for this forum, I had Jessica Morris, my communications director, I said, I want to make sure I have it right. It's vote yes, right? She said, yes, of course. And I said, well, I just want to make sure because I know it's coming from people who want to see people's rights taken away from them. So we need to make sure that we have the messaging that works, working with Freedom for All Massachusetts to make sure that we talk about what vote yes means. Vote yes for dignity. Vote yes for respect. Vote yes to make sure that these divisive battles stay in the past, not in the present. Vote yes to make sure that we can truly build a commonwealth that treats everybody with the dignity and the respect that they deserve. And make no mistakes about it, you know, as we talk about public accommodations, the City of Boston passed a public accommodations ordinance in 2002. That was 16 years ago. You know how many incidents we've had that the opponents of this was? We've had no incidents. Of course we haven't. This is the, you know, public accommodations, whether it's talking about restroom, whether it's talking about water fountains, it's dignity. It's something that we need to make sure that we can protect for all. So as I said, we have our work cut out for us, but I know that working together, the people of this Commonwealth are good, are inherently decent, and we're going to win this. So I'd just like to close in conclusion by paraphrasing Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King. None of us is free until we are all free. And that's why we have to work our hearts out between now and November to make sure that we protect the great work that has happened and protect public accommodations. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Question.
We're gonna
What is the actual name of the ballot initiative? What do you see when you go?
we're gonna find out all about it. Now we're gonna kick it off. So we're right on. We're gonna open the program with an incredible impact story. Caden Avery Mohammed is a graduate of Wellesley. He works full-time at Keshet and serves on the screening committee of the Massachusetts Transgender Political Coalition. He was featured in the Spirit magazine 2017 Young Trailblazers list for activists under 30. Please give a warm welcome to Caden.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here tonight, and thanks to Annie, the JP Forum, and all of the other co-sponsors who helped put this event together. As Annie said, my name is Kaden Mohammed. I'm 25 years old. I was born and raised in New York City, but I've lived my entire adult life in Massachusetts. I love to bike, exercise, listen to music, hang out with my friends and my family. I work in the nonprofit sector, as Annie said. I'm just another person trying to make it through life like each of you in this room. I also happen to be a transgender man. Before I share some more about myself, I want to start by saying that this is my own personal story and journey, and even though there are similarities and common experiences between all trans people, we are not a monolithic group. So we all have our own stories, our own identities, and ways of relating to that. So this is my story and not anyone else's. So to tell you a little bit about myself, I want to first take you back about 20 years or so. One of the first things that I'm often asked is when I first knew that I'm trans. From a very young age, under the age of 5, I have really distinct memories of trying to do things like pee standing up, or pretending to shave with my father, who would give me razors with a plastic cover still on them, and battling with my mom about wearing things that were pink or putting on a dress, sometimes to the point of tears. I never really had the language to fully understand what was going on. I didn't have the vocabulary that I needed, or the access to information or representation of trans identities and experiences in my personal life or in the media to understand why I felt so disconnected from what people thought I was supposed to be. I was supposed to act like a girl and be feminine in various ways, and it just didn't make sense to me why that didn't fit. As I grew up, those feelings didn't go away, but because of not knowing how I felt or why I felt that way, and because middle school and high school are hard enough as it is, I ended up burying and shoving those feelings down to try my best to fit in. Looking back on my childhood and my teen years, I can see that it was even harder than I realized at the time. I remember so many instances of discomfort and sadness, of anger and isolation and brokenness, stemming from my internal struggle and at the time, confusion about what I was feeling. Fast forward about 15 years or so, and I was getting ready to head off to college. As Annie said, I ended up going to Wellesley College, which ironically, for anyone who is unfamiliar, happens to be a women's college. Perhaps even more ironically, Wellesley is the first place that I met other trans people for the first time. And I began to explore my own gender identity. It was a place that I felt safe, where I was exposed to new ideas and concepts and people, all of which opened my eyes in different ways, leading to a deeper understanding of how I had been feeling for my entire life. All the pieces that I couldn't make sense of before finally began to click, and I realized that I'm a transgender man. By the time I started my junior year of college, I was using only male pronouns. I was going by the name Kaden, and I began my physical transition that March. The past 6 years since beginning my transition have by far been the happiest of my life. Being able to live as the person I am, to live authentically and true to myself, has completely changed my life. I went from being uncomfortable every day in the clothes that I wore, in the people I talked to, in the way that I looked in the mirror, in almost every aspect of my life, to being somebody who's happy, fulfilled, and excited about living. I went from feeling like I had to hide myself from everyone around me, to feeling like I could live a normal life, being who I really am, and still be respected by my friends, my peers, and my family. At the end of the day, I think that that's what all people want, including trans people. We want to be able to live authentically, to pursue our passions in life, to find success for ourselves, to be loved, and to be treated with respect and dignity by the people around us. We want to be able to exist. As you learn more throughout the night about this anti-discrimination law to protect transgender people in public spaces and the ballot question, I hope you'll keep that in mind, because to me, that's really what this law is about. It's about making sure that everyone, regardless of their gender identity, is treated equally and allowed to exist freely in public spaces. It's about making sure that transgender people like me can go about their daily lives without feeling a need to hide who we are for fear of being discriminated against when we're making a trip to the grocery store or going out to see a movie. It's about making sure that transgender people can take a walk in the park with their family or go to a hospital in an emergency without the anxiety about, or even worse than that, actually being kicked out or refused treatment. Sometimes I think about my daily life and how many times I'm in a public space. On the T, when I go to the cafe near my office or the gym on my way home from work, when I buy groceries or eat at a restaurant. It's hard to think that without this law, I wouldn't be safe in those places. To think I could be discriminated against multiple times a day, every single day, just for being transgender. It scares me to think about other transgender people in my community who are at even greater risk than I am, like trans women, trans youth, and people who live in less trans-friendly parts of the state, who are all more likely to experience discrimination and harassment without this law. This law helps Massachusetts move towards being a safe place for all transgender people. We all have the chance to stand behind our transgender friends and neighbors and community members by voting yes. Yes to keep this law and uphold basic human rights for trans people. Yes to let trans people know that we are accepted and seen as the human beings that we are, deserving of dignity. Yes to send the message to everyone here and across the country that Massachusetts stands for equality and that discrimination will not be allowed or tolerated in our state. With that, I hope all of you will learn more about this ballot question tonight and then go share this information with the people in your life, your friends, your colleagues, your family members, your neighbors, so that even more people can join us in voting yes in November to affirm that every trans person has the right to exist and thrive anywhere in this state. Thank you so much, everyone.
We'll have a moment towards the end for Q&A if you are interested in asking any questions, just so you know. I'd like to welcome Karina Patel, who's the Coalition Director for Freedom for All. And Karina is an active community member that serves as Secretary on the Executive Board of the Women's Bar Association for Massachusetts and the co-chair for the WBA Legislation Policy Committee that advocates for a variety of social justice issues. And she was just honored by the Massachusetts Lawyers Weekly for excellence in law. Please give a warm welcome to Karina Patel.
Hi everyone, I'm the Coalition Director of Freedom for All Massachusetts and a proud resident of Jamaica Plain for 5 years now. So Freedom for All Massachusetts, we are a ballot campaign and we are working to uphold our transgender non-discrimination law at the ballot in November of 2018. So we have a coalition of almost 1,500 partners, including organizations, businesses, faith leaders, unions, universities, safety advocates, you name it. But our campaign is governed by 8 leading local and national equality organizations. So Mass Equality, GLAAD, the Mass Transgender Political Coalition, the Human Rights Campaign, the ACLU, Greater Boston PFLAG, and Bagley. So that's who governs our campaign. And we're going to get, so what we're going to do tonight is really walk you through the background of the law, give you a bit of a campaign update, talk about our opposition and what we're up against, and the most important piece is what you can do to help us uphold the law. So concrete action steps that you can take to help us uphold the law. So just to kind of set the stage, we're going to show you a very brief campaign video. We showed this at our launch just about a month ago.
A new law is now in effect that is fighting back against discrimination for transgender individuals.
The bill is passed, they're being gross.
It's more about dignity, respect, and the ability of our youth to be able to grow up in a world where they're accepted.
I'm a transgender man, which means that I was born female, but I knew from a very early age that I was not a girl. Eventually I transitioned to live every day as the person that I've always known deep inside of myself to be.
The law basically bans places like restaurants and businesses from discriminating against transgender people.
Nicole and I were in the chamber when the law passed, and it was one of the most exhilarating experiences.
I was so happy. I felt like everything, just like all of the fear of looking back over my shoulder was gone.
Having full protections under the law makes me actually feel like not a second-class citizen.
If they take away this law, it brings me to a point where I can be discriminated against by not being allowed to use public places, and the legal protection goes away.
The thought of this law being overturned in 2018 is paralyzing to me.
The discrimination at work, in schools, in public spaces, the violence that transgender people experience.
If I talk to another parent, I say, would you want your child's rights to be restricted?
We should be publicly accommodating. We shouldn't discriminate against people.
I don't want the younger generation of trans females to go through what I went through.
Transgender rights are human rights.
We should be able to live our lives like everyone else and be accepted for who we are.
For every citizen of Massachusetts, what I hope they understand is that this law may not have any impact in their everyday lives, but it has critical, immense impact to transgender people and to the people who love those transgender people.
Great. And so with that, I'm going to... So with that, I'm going to kick it off to the rest of our Freedom for All Massachusetts team. I'd like to bring up Mason Dunn. Mason heads the Mass Transgender Political Coalition, and he's also co-chair of our campaign. And Mason has been there since the real launch of the Freedom Massachusetts campaign to get the legislation passed in the first place. So thanks, Mason.
Someone's gonna hate me if I take this off and walk and talk. I'm a walk and talk kind of person. I'll try not to fall over. No guarantees. So you've already heard a little bit of a history lesson of how we got here. To summarize quickly, we passed the non-discrimination protections for public accommodations for trans people in 2016. Now, Liz Molly, you cannot answer this. How many folks here know when we passed non-discrimination protections for sexual orientation? When did we pass non-discrimination protections for sexual orientation? Yes. Nope, not 2012. Yes. Not 2010. Close, 1989 is when we passed non-discrimination protections for sexual orientation. So it's been a few years to get us where we are here, to bring up gender identity protections to the same place where we got to for sexual orientation in 1989. I'm gonna grab that from you real quick. We're good. We're good. All right. So just the lay of the land here in Massachusetts is one thing. It's really important that we understand that this has national context. So here in the US, we see this lovely map, which is slightly out of date, where we have non-discrimination laws based on gender identity. And it's mostly coastal, and you'll notice there's a lot of gray in that area. And the one new update, by the way, is New Hampshire. New Hampshire just passed non-discrimination protections for gender identity just a few weeks ago. Congratulations, New Hampshire. Yeah. Now let's talk about recent anti-LGBTQ legislation. The red on this map far outweighs the red on that map. There are numerous attempts to roll back or blatantly discriminate against LGBTQ people in so many states, including, yes, here in Massachusetts. There are attempts to say that LGBTQ people, but trans people in particular, do not deserve the basic human rights and protections that all people deserve. And we know that this anti-LGBTQ legislation has an impact. The economic impact we really saw, obviously in North Carolina, for folks who are familiar with what happened with House Bill 2, we saw very clearly what happens when we have protections rolled back or anti-LGBTQ measures passed. Here you can see in 2016, the Harvard Business Review study found that LGBTQ-friendly states attract large number of investors who produce 30% more patents than their peers. And then the reference to North Carolina's House Bill 2. And I think this is particularly important here, tourism in Massachusetts. LGBTQ people don't want to go tour places or visit places or vacation places where there are anti-LGBTQ laws. And so we know this has an impact across the board when it comes to the economy. So as we mentioned, we passed these protections in 2016, and it was after many years of fighting. We passed in 2011 the first round of non-discrimination protections for gender identity in housing, employment, credit, and lending, and added gender identity to the statewide hate crimes law. Unfortunately, as that legislation was moving towards passage, they pulled out public accommodations. And then we had to come back for that in 2016, which actually we started in 2014, 2013, and then achieved that in 2016. I get this question a lot. What are public accommodations? Now, without looking at this, I'm going to take that away for a moment. What do you think most people think about when they hear public accommodations for transgender people? Bathrooms. That is the biggest miscommunication and myth about what public accommodations are and what transgender rights are. So public accommodations, you can just basically supplement public spaces. Any public space, any place that is open to or solicits business from the public is a public accommodation. We are talking about parks and libraries and hospitals and restaurants and grocery stores, all of those places that we need to exist in public. And by not having public accommodations protected, what that tells the trans community is that you're allowed to be trans at home, you're allowed to be trans at school or trans at work, but we don't want to see you in public spaces. And that's the message that we hear. So it's critical that we keep these protections. We have so many amazing businesses who are supportive of this work, including Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare, and that could launch a whole other conversation about trans rights in healthcare. But suffice to say, we have so many healthcare providers and insurers who are supportive of this issue. And we have businesses saying that this is good for business, that this is important for Massachusetts, not just from a human rights perspective, but from an entire economic picture of the state of Massachusetts. So we've passed the legislation almost 2 years ago, signed into law by Governor Baker, which is interesting to note, having had a Republican governor sign this into law. Although we no longer have that very bright, strange sometimes distinction, with New Hampshire having passed transgender protections in a Republican-controlled House as well as Republican governor. But nevertheless, we signed this important legislation into law July 6th, 2016. And so that is an important note that we have had these protections now. They went into effect October 1st, 2016. So we've had these protections for now almost, by the time we get to the vote, we'll have had them for 2 whole years. And to roll back those 2 years of protections is what's at stake. So I'm going to hand this over to Karina here to talk a little bit about where we go from here. Do you want the podium or do you want the mic?
This is fine. Thanks, Mason. So this victory here was short-lived. So as Mason mentioned, in October of 2016, the law went into effect. Literally a couple of weeks after that date, our opponents got enough signatures to place this on the ballot for appeal. So in Massachusetts, when you want to repeal a law or do a voter referendum, you only need 32,000 signatures. And that's actually a very low threshold. It's much higher in other states. So our opponents were able to get those 32,000 signatures. It's less than 1% of the voting population, but they got those signatures and they qualified this on the ballot back in October 2016 to appear on the November 2018 ballot. So we've known since October of 2016 that this is going to be on the ballot this year. This is a voter referendum. It's unlike some of the other ballot measures you may have been hearing about. Those have various different procedural hurdles. This qualified back in 2016. Massachusetts has only had about 20 voter referendums in the past, and the last one was 20 years ago. They aren't used very frequently, and Massachusetts is the first state in the entire country to put a repeal of trans rights on our ballot. We are the first state, and a lot of eyes are on Massachusetts. Our opponents picked Massachusetts for a reason. They know that if they can win here, they can win anywhere in the country. So if we lose here in Massachusetts, we will see the floodgates of discrimination open up in the entire country. And these are two pieces from the Boston Globe and Politico, kind of highlighting the fact that Massachusetts will really be a battleground state on this issue. In the Politico article, there was actually a quote from our opponents at the local level, the Mass Family Institute, and their head, Andrew Beckwith, who said, if they can stop the transgender rights movement here in Massachusetts, they can stop it anywhere. So both sides are acknowledging the national implications of something like this. And you had asked about the ballot language. We know two major pieces. So we know that we are the yes vote. So if there's one thing that you remember from tonight's presentation, remember we are the yes vote. We've had media, we've had pollsters, we've had even our fellow advocates get confused on this. Ballot questions by nature are confusing, but just remember we are the yes vote. And the best way to remember that is we're voting to protect or uphold our law. So don't think about it in the context of repeal, think about it in the context of we're voting to uphold our transgender non-discrimination law. We also know how the yes and no language will read on the actual election ballot. So it will say, a yes vote would keep in place the current law, which prohibits discrimination on the basis of gender identity in places of public accommodation. A no vote would repeal this provision of the public accommodations law. So that's how you'll see it explained on the ballot. We will know the actual question number in a few weeks. Secretary of State's office will let us know that. But as Chairman Sánchez mentioned, a lot of ballot questions that were in contention have been solved legislatively in the last week or so. So we will probably only see a couple of questions on the ballot. So we will be one of the maybe two questions on the ballot. This is the coalition that we're working with. So we built the majority of this coalition during the legislative campaign. And my role as coalition director is to really go back to all of these amazing partners that work so hard to get the law passed and let them know that our work is not done. We need to band together one more time, this time to uphold the law. But it's different now. You know, we're not trying to convince legislators. We're trying to change the hearts and minds of voters. So we need to, educate people. We need to have effective and heartwarming conversations about who transgender people are, why this law is important, and refute any claims about whether this law will make people less safe. So this is the amazing coalition we're working with. This is pictures from our launch just about a month ago, and just even looking at these pictures, you can see the broad support we have. You see the House Speaker there, you see Caden there, you see parents of transgender children, you have the Union of Minority Neighborhoods, you have Partners Healthcare, you have Justice Williams, who's a trainer at Mike's Gym in JP. So it just shows just the broad support we have and all of the amazing partners that are working with us to help uphold the law. And I do want to mention we are a bipartisan campaign, and that is something very unique about our issue compared to a lot of the other issues. We have support from Democrats, Republicans, businesses, as well as community organizations, so our support is quite broad. So now I'm going to turn it over to David, and David is going to talk more about what we're up against in terms of the opposition and why we need this coalition, and specifically what you all can do to help us uphold the law.
Hi, everyone. Yes, thank you. Yeah, sure. Yeah. All right, that better. Great. So we're going to show another video here quickly, but I want to give context to why we're showing this video and really how this ballot referendum really fits with nationally around non-discrimination protections for transgender folks. So in 2015, Houston, Texas had a similar thing on the ballot. For those of you who may not have been to Houston, even though it's in Texas, it is a very progressive, very vibrant, diverse city. Houston at the time had Anise Parker as their mayor. Anise Parker is the first lesbian mayor of a large city in the country, and she had just been reelected a couple years before. So it's a generally progressive city, a city that has a strong history with LGBTQ folks. And in 2015, they had a local non-discrimination ordinance that covered employment, housing, and public accommodations. You know, for them, they didn't just have a public accommodations law, it covered everyone. It covered a lot of different categories. And not just transgender folks, but people across the board. There were no local protections in Houston. The city council passed that law, it went to repeal at the ballot, and when they were polling on that law, they were being supported at about 64%. So polling in the 60s. When they went to the ballot and actually voted in November of 2015, they lost at 39%. And there are a lot of reasons for that, right? There's not a lot of time to run a campaign. It was a very difficult race. There was a lot of ballot confusion, similar to what we're seeing here, where people would not understand the right way to vote. But one of the biggest things that happened is our opposition has a really impactful message when they do this. And most folks in this room are going to roll their eyes, but our opposition boils this down to no men in women's bathrooms, which to us in this room, we roll our eyes, we shake our heads, we think most people do that. The fact of the matter is, that message, relying on fears about women and children and focusing in on protecting people and really making transgender folks the other, is impactful. And that's part of what happened in Houston. When they were going to the ballot, everyone thought it was the bathroom bill. They referred to it as a bathroom bill. No one referred to it as the Houston Equal Rights Ordinance, is what it actually was. And they showed this ad that we're gonna show. This is an ad that was all over television in Houston. Everywhere you went, you saw this ad. And I wanna be really clear for folks before we press play on it. This is really disturbing and it's really difficult to watch. If you are a little uncomfortable, we're gonna shake it off a little bit afterwards, I promise. But this is the ad that they know works. This is the ad a similar ad that will air here in Massachusetts. And we know it works, we've tested it, we've seen what people do here, and we've seen the kind of impact that this ad can have on people, no matter who they are, no matter where they live. When we go to the door and talk to folks, we show these kinds of ads so we can process through the messaging with folks. When we talk to people on the phone, we bring up this kind of message, and we see where people go. Lots of folks drop, but we're able to bring them back. Oh, there you go. Okay, so we're gonna show this, and again, this is hard to watch. I wanna be really clear, but it's important to know this is what our opposition says and where they go.
Houston's Proposition 1 bathroom ordinance. What does it mean to you? Any man at any time could enter a woman's bathroom simply by claiming to be a woman that day. No one is exempt. Even registered sex offenders could follow women or young girls into the bathroom, and if a business tried to stop them, they'd be fined. Protect women's privacy. Prevent danger. Vote no on the Proposition 1 bathroom ordinance. It goes too far.
Okay. Shake it off a little bit. It's awful to see, right? But I want to be really clear. Our opposition has already started saying this here in Massachusetts. They released a video a few months ago showing a little girl going into her bathroom and being afraid and disgusted by a transgender person who was there. We know this works because we've actually tested it. You know, we've done polls of likely voters who will actually vote this year in November. And what we have found is that most folks start up here. When you ask someone, do you support non-discrimination protections for transgender people? Folks, of course, mostly say yes. However, when you bring up our opposition's message and start talking a bit about bathrooms, that support drops. We're able to bring folks back, and there's a few ways that we do that. Make sure. So there's a few ways that we actually do that. So we've had staff on the ground since April of 2017 who have been building volunteer teams across the state to actually talk to folks and discuss these laws and move people to understand why these protections are so important and process through our opposition's message. We show it to them first because we don't want the first time for someone to see this video to be in their living room and for them to immediately lose support with us. What we're doing is actually really different than what a lot of political campaigns do, which is we go to the door, we talk about our opposition's message, we explain why their concerns can be validated and move them to support and understand why this is actually an important thing for transgender folks and why our opposition's message is not factual. So, like I said, we've had staff on the ground since April of 2017. We started here in Boston. We now have staff in Boston, Worcester, and Northampton, and we actually have volunteer teams pretty much everywhere throughout the state. No matter where you are in the state of Massachusetts, you can be involved with this campaign. There's a few things that you can do. Some volunteers in the back are gonna start passing out this action sheet. And so Kelly, Caitlin, if you can start passing through, thank you. They're gonna start passing out this action sheet. On here is some ways to get your information. Please fill it out fully, name, phone number, and email. And some ways that you can get involved. The first is by knocking on doors and talking to voters. The most impactful thing that you can do is by picking a Saturday, saying, I'm gonna go knock on doors from 10 to 3 on a Saturday. We actually have a canvas that launches out of Jamaica Plain every Sunday. Saturday and Sunday, we knock on doors, we talk to folks about this campaign and why it's important, and we spread the word. I see some folks in this room who have canvassed with us before. It is incredibly important that we do that. We knock on doors and we talk to people, because what we've found is that the best way to refute our opposition's message is by actually having conversations with people and processing through it with them. We can't just assume that everyone here is supportive and that no one here is going to be impacted by that message, because what we know is that a lot of folks are on both sides of the aisle. Democrats, Republicans, folks who are generally with us span across a lot of different demographic boundaries. We find that no matter what we do, the best thing that we can do is actually have conversations. And when we actually do go to the door and talk to folks and have this conversation and we show them our opposition's message, we can bring them back. We train you, we get you ready, we get you set to go, and you go with the partner. Another way that you can be involved is by being part of our volunteer recruitment phone banks. So we have one that happens at the Beacon Hill Friends House on Tuesdays, and there's one coming up on July 3rd, where we call supporters, talk to them about the campaign, and get them involved. You know, when we think about how many volunteers that we need to have across the state, we've had already a little over 1,000 people volunteer with us up to now. We need roughly 4,000 to 5,000 people to actually come in, be part of the team, and help spread the word about this. One of the next things that you can do is bring people with you. So one of the most exciting things for me is when we're at a canvas or at a phone bank and someone walks in and says, oh, I brought a couple of my friends with me. Is that okay? Yes, please do. Bring folks in with you. And then the next thing is to get other folks to take action. There's a few actions on here. Kelly and Caitlin actually have some calendars in the back that show every action that we have throughout the entire region of Boston. There is something going on literally every single day. And so I guarantee you there's some way that you can get involved and work with us and be part of the team. Some of the other ways, you had your postcard that was handed out earlier. Kelly and Caitlin may have walked by and had you sign something. That postcard is how we know that you're a supporter, right? It's how you pledge that you're going to support us and be on the team. If you were interested in getting your own folks to sign postcards, come talk to me afterwards. And then the very last thing, there's a few other pieces on there about ways you can kind of be involved and get engaged. I really want to make sure that every single person in this room knows that just saying that you are supportive and you're going to vote yes, right now is not enough. When we think about what could happen with this campaign and where we actually stand, you know, there are some polls recently released that showed that this is really a 50-50 race. This is a tight race right now, and we see that at the door. We see whenever we go and talk to folks, there are people who are impacted by our opposition's message who get afraid, and not because they don't like transgender folks, but because they don't understand what it means to be transgender. They don't understand why our opposition would say the things that they do, and so they need you to come to their door, to call their phone and talk to them. When I think about the work that we're doing every single day to make sure that this law actually passes, I think about every single transgender person in the state of Massachusetts and across the country who is watching this, wondering if they can live their lives in public, who is watching this election and thinking about, can I actually go out and be my authentic self? I think about transgender children who have stepped forward and been voices and who have said, like, this is me, this is who I am, and have put themselves on the line to make sure that folks understand what this means. And I think about literally every single person who is going to wake up on November 7th, and they're gonna hope that Massachusetts voted to say, yes, we affirm you, we see you, we validate you, we support you, and that we voted to support, and that we voted to keep these laws. I worry about the folks who may wake up if we lose and see that an entire state, a progressive state, a supposedly liberal state, voted to repeal protections for transgender people. And so just saying that you support and that you're going to vote yes is not enough. We need to make sure that every single person in the state votes yes. And we need to build the teams to actually get there. So there's a lot of different ways that you can kind of be involved with the campaign. Please fill out this action sheet and hand it back to Kelly and Kaylin back. Kelly, Kaylin, can you wave your hands really quickly? Those are some of our wonderful volunteers who are here tonight. If you are interested in getting involved, please fill out that action sheet and make sure that you're able to kind of get connected and be involved with the campaign. So I think handing it over, right? Great. Oh, yeah.
Thank you so much. We're going to pause for a moment. Senator Sonia Chang-Diaz is here, and she's going to come up and please give her a warm welcome.
Better? All right. So good evening, everybody. I'm Sonia Chang-Diaz. I'm your state senator if you live in JP. So I'm not thrilled to be here because I wish this wasn't on the ballot, but it is. It is. And so I'm thrilled to be here in that context, and I'm so glad to see you guys here. This gives me hope that there are going to be boots on the ground in the way that we're going to need to have boots on the ground this fall to make sure that we guard and protect the rights that we so fiercely fought for and won through the legislature. And it is going to take those boots on the ground. I will tell you, even as the dang lead sponsor of the bill in the legislature, that secured equal rights in our law for transgender-based staters, I didn't know until recently that the right way to vote on this question was yes. Right? So even, that is part of the work that we have to do, right? Even for our allies, there is education work to do out there. And it's not complicated work, right? As you've heard, these are simple steps to do, but it's not necessarily easy, right? It's gonna take labor, it's gonna take heart, it's gonna take sweat equity to make sure that we carve out a piece of attention for our neighbors and friends and folks across the state this fall to make sure that they know what to do and they know what the stakes are for real people in this Commonwealth when they go into that ballot box in November. So I'm here just to say I'm all in. And I wanted also to introduce you guys to Ethan from my office, who's the JP Neighborhood Liaison. Many of you know him. He's wonderful. He can't advocate on this question because we can't do that on state taxpayer time, but he's just here as JP Neighborhood Liaison to hear your concerns. But I can, because my personal time is fungible, and here it is. So I'm proud to stand here with the ballot campaign to make sure that people know to vote yes, and again, what the stakes are. So thank you in advance for the work and the heart that you're going to put into this campaign.
Thank you so much. Before bringing Karine and David back up, I just want to point out there was a lot of interest in this event to come. Over 300 people showed an interest, and I'm sitting here trying to figure out, this is a great amount of people, but why so many people didn't show up? And I think to really bring it home, this is more than just a ballot question about public accommodations. These are hate crimes. This is far more than discrimination. There are our transgender brothers and sisters that are being murdered, and it's not being talked about. And I think that a certain extent is really fear. So the folks who were brave enough to come out here tonight, and it's amazing, look at how many of our political figures came and had a couple of words to say. Please, you have our support, you have our political figure support, tell your families, and this is so much bigger. So thank you so much. To get back to the program, I'm gonna bring, right, you're gonna finish up with some? Mason? Okay, thank you.
All right. It's a little sleepy. Are we feeling a little sleepy? All right, we're gonna change that right now, because I'm a rabble-rouser and a grassroots organizer, and we get our work done when we chant. All right, so we're gonna do a little call and response. All right. Now, usually we chant, "What do we want? Trans rights. When do we want it? Now." I'm gonna change that up because we need to remember this yes vote, right? So I'm gonna say, "What do we want? Trans rights." I'm gonna say, "What do we want?" You respond with trans rights. What do we do? Vote yes. All right, you ready? So what do we want? What do we do? What do we want? What do we do? What do we want? What do we do? Thank you. All right.